As evening deepened toward night, preparations for sleep would begin. This transition was marked by specific rituals designed to secure both physical and psychological comfort through the dangerous hours of darkness and extreme cold. The fire would be carefully banked, covered with ashes to slow combustion while maintaining enough heat to be easily revived in the morning. This was a skilled task requiring precise judgment. Too little damping and precious fuel would burn away overnight. Too much and the fire might go out completely, leaving the house dangerously cold by dawn. Outside doors would be checked and secured. Livestock would receive a final inspection. Water would be brought inside so it wouldn't freeze overnight, with enough stored for morning needs before the pump or well could be accessed. Chamber pots would be placed in bedrooms, as the outhouse was a forbidding destination during freezing nights. These practical vessels, often kept under beds, eliminated the need for dangerous nighttime journeys outside or to unheated parts of the house. Washing before bed was minimal by modern standards, perhaps just hands and face in water warmed by the fire. Full baths were weekly events at most, typically scheduled for Saturdays in preparation for Sunday church attendance. Bedtime clothing was designed for warmth rather than appearance. Long flannel nightgowns or shirts covered the body from neck to ankle. Nightcaps, actual caps worn while sleeping, not the alcoholic drinks, kept heads warm. Some people even wore socks to bed, particularly the elderly or those with poor circulation. Beds themselves required preparation. In unheated bedrooms, sheets and blankets would be painfully cold. Various warming methods were employed: hot water bottles, heated bricks wrapped in flannel, warming pans filled with embers and run between the sheets before entry. These provided initial comfort that had to last until body heat gradually warmed the enclosed space under heavy covers. Bedrooms in Edwardian farmhouses rarely had fireplaces of their own. Heating was considered unnecessary for spaces used primarily for unconscious hours, and there were safety concerns about unattended fires. Instead, the architectural design often clustered bedrooms around the kitchen chimney, allowing some residual warmth to penetrate these spaces. The actual moment of going to bed followed careful staging. Lamps would be extinguished one by one as family members retired, with perhaps a single candle lighting the way upstairs. Undressing in a cold bedroom was done with remarkable speed. Modern researchers have timed historical reenactors and found they could change from day clothes to nightwear in under a minute when properly motivated by cold. Then came the dash into bed, pulling heavy covers up quickly to trap whatever warmth existed. The weight of winter bedding was substantial: multiple quilts, blankets, and perhaps a feather comforter for fortunate households. This weight provided both warmth and a sense of security, like being embraced by layers of protection against the hostile night. Family sleeping arrangements were practical rather than private. Children often shared beds for warmth, regardless of gender, until a certain age. In smaller homes, multiple beds might occupy a single room. The elderly might sleep downstairs near the kitchen range if stairs became difficult to navigate. These arrangements weren't just about space limitations, but survival strategy. Shared body heat made a significant difference in comfort and safety. Sleep itself followed different patterns than we experience today. Without electric lighting artificially extending days, Edwardian rural families were more aligned with natural light cycles. Winter brought longer sleep periods, sometimes up to 10 hours, though these might be broken into segments. The phenomenon of first sleep and second sleep was still common in rural areas. People would sleep for several hours after dark, then wake naturally around midnight. This wakeful period might last an hour or more before second sleep commenced until dawn. far from being considered insomnia. This pattern was normal and utilized productively for quiet contemplation, marital intimacy, checking on fires or livestock, or simply listening to the winter night. During this midnight waking, the house would be nearly silent and absolutely dark except for the faint glow of banked fires. The sounds would be minimal, the tick of a clock if the family owned one, the creak of the structure responding to cold, perhaps the distant howl of wind or fox. This peaceful interlude provided a different quality of consciousness than either daytime or full sleep. A liminal space for reflection impossible in our constantly illuminated modern world. The deepest cold came in the hours before dawn, when even banked fires burned low and the house's residual heat dissipated. This was when frost might form on the inside of bedroom windows, when water left in basins would freeze solid, when the extra blanket at the foot of the bed would be pulled up for additional warmth. This pre-dawn period was particularly dangerous for the vulnerable, the very young, the elderly, the ill. Families developed protective routines with someone, often the mother, rising in these darkest hours to check on children and older relatives, perhaps add fuel to fires, ensuring everyone remained safe through the night's coldest point. The awareness of vulnerability was constant. Winter night was not just uncomfortable but potentially deadly. Carbon monoxide from improperly maintained fires, hypothermia from inadequate heating, fire from unattended lamps or candles. These dangers shaped behaviours and created vigilance that modern people with our smoke detectors and central heating can hardly imagine. Yet within this challenging environment, Edwardian farm families found profound comfort. The contrast between hostile outdoor conditions and the relative warmth of the home created appreciation for simple pleasures. The shared experience of winter survival strengthened bonds between family members and neighbours. The predictable rhythms of evening rituals provided psychological security in uncertain times. As the night deepens, the farmhouse settles into near-complete stillness. Outside, perhaps moonlight reflects off snow, creating an ethereal landscape of silver and shadow. Inside, the family sleeps under layers of wool and cotton, their breath visible in cold bedrooms, their bodies instinctively curled for warmth. Dreams might be influenced by physical sensations, the weight of blankets becoming dream mountains to climb, the cold tip of a nose inspiring visions of Arctic exploration. The subconscious processes the day's events while the body conserves energy for tomorrow's work. Somewhere in the house, a clock might tick steadily, marking the progression through darkness toward dawn. Each completed day of winter was a small victory, one more successfully navigated milestone on the journey toward spring. The family sleeps, gathering strength for tomorrow's identical battle against cold, darkness, and scarcity. In farmhouses across Devonshire, across all of rural England, this scene repeats with variations determined by wealth, family size, and individual circumstance, but the fundamental experience of winter night transcended these differences, creating a shared cultural understanding that shaped the Edwardian rural character, resilient, practical, and intimately connected to natural cycles. Outside, perhaps snow continues to fall, transforming the landscape into something both beautiful and treacherous. The farmhouse stands as a small island of human presence in the vast winter night, its sleeping inhabitants temporarily surrendered to darkness, but prepared to re-emerge with dawn, continuing the ancient patterns of rural winter survival. In the deepest heart of an Edwardian winter, when darkness seems eternal and cold penetrates to the bone, the real test of survival begins. January and February brought what rural Devonshire families called the hungry months, when preserved food stores began to dwindle, when fuel supplies ran low, when the promise of spring seemed impossibly distant. These were the days when the thermometer might not rise above freezing for weeks, when snow could pile in drifts taller than a man, when the very air seemed to crystallize with each breath. This was when survival depended not just on physical preparation, but on mental fortitude, community bonds, and the accumulated wisdom of generations. Let's step into this challenging world and see how Edwardian farm families endured the darkest days of winter. Dawn arrives late during these deep winter months, sometimes not until after 8 a.m. in northern parts of England. The family rises in darkness, their movements slow and deliberate in the frigid morning air. The first person up, often the mother or father, has the hardest task, leaving the relative warmth of bed to rekindle the banked fire. Kneeling before the range, working by touch as much as by sight, they carefully uncover the embers preserved overnight beneath their blanket of ash. With nearly frozen fingers, they add small pieces of kindling, gently blowing to encourage the faint glow into flame. This daily resurrection of fire connects them to ancestors stretching back to prehistoric times, the fundamental human act of creating warmth from darkness. As the fire catches and grows, the kitchen gradually becomes the one tolerable space in the otherwise freezing house. Family members emerge from bedrooms wrapped in blankets, gathering close to the range. The day begins with this huddling, this shared experience of discomfort, slowly transforming into bearable warmth. Breakfast is simple but essential. Hot porridge made with the farm's stored oats, perhaps with a small amount of precious sugar or preserved fruit for flavour. The steaming bowls warm hands before they warm bellies. Tea is brewed strong, providing caffeine to jumpstart cold-slowed bodies and minds. Outside, the farm lies transformed under winter's heaviest mantle. Perhaps fog hangs in the river valleys, or frost coats every surface with delicate crystals, or snow blankets the landscape in pristine white. This beauty carries danger. Each breathtaking winter scene represents another challenge to survival. The first outdoor task is creating paths through snow to outbuildings, animal shelters, the well or pump, the woodpile. This isn't just convenience but necessity. In deep snow, even familiar spaces become treacherous mazes. A clear path to the privy could be literally life-saving during illness or for the elderly. Access to animals meant they could be fed and watered. The path to the road connected the farm to potential help in emergencies. Snow shoveling was exhausting work, particularly in the drifts that formed on the windward sides of buildings or against hedgerows. Long-handled wooden shovels were used, their edges sometimes reinforced with metal strips. The technique was to lift smaller amounts rather than trying to move too much at once, a steady rhythm that conserved energy while making gradual progress. In the worst storms, families might run ropes between buildings, literal lifelines that could be followed when visibility dropped to near zero in blizzard conditions. A farmer caught outside during a sudden snowstorm might lose all sense of direction within yards of his own door. The ropes provided tactile guidance when landmarks disappeared in swirling white. Water management became critically important. Frozen pipes and pumps could leave the household without access to this most basic necessity. Various preventive measures were employed. Pumps might be wrapped with straw or old blankets. Indoor pipes were sometimes packed with sawdust for insulation. If freezing seemed inevitable, systems would be drained to prevent the destructive expansion of ice. When prevention failed and water sources froze anyway, alternatives had to be found. Snow could be melted, though this was inefficient and required significant fuel. Natural springs, if available, might continue flowing even in the coldest weather. In coastal areas, salt water could be used for cleaning purposes, saving precious fresh water for drinking and cooking. The livestock faced their own winter struggles. Cattle, sheep, pigs, and poultry all needed special attention during extreme cold. Their usual routines were modified to conserve their energy and your own. Water troughs needed constant checking and breaking of ice. Feeding schedules might be adjusted, providing more calories during the coldest periods and timing meals to maximize the animal's natural heat generation. Bedding was added generously to stalls and pens, creating insulating layers that trapped body heat. Special attention was paid to vulnerable animals, the pregnant, the very young, the elderly. A sheep about to lamb might be brought into a warmer space to protect the newborn from freezing. A cow close to calving received extra feed and the cleanest, most sheltered spot in the barn. Checking animals during severe weather meant multiple trips into the bitter cold. Each journey had to be carefully planned to accomplish maximum tasks with minimum exposure. Tools were gathered, feed prepared, water carried, all to limit time spent in dangerous conditions. Even with these precautions, winter brought inevitable losses. A chicken found frozen on its roost, a newborn lamb that couldn't be revived, a weakened elder cow that simply lay down one morning and wouldn't rise again. Edwardian farmers faced these deaths with stoicism, born of necessity. They mourned briefly, salvaged what they could, and focused on protecting the remaining animals. Inside the farmhouse, the battle against cold continued on multiple fronts. The physical structure itself creaked and shifted with freezing and thawing. Gaps appeared in doors and window frames as wood contracted in the dry, cold air. These were stuffed with rags or paper to prevent drafts. The limited number of heated rooms became even more restrictive during extreme cold. Family activities concentrated in the kitchen, with excursions to other parts of the house kept brief and purposeful. Chamber pots eliminated nighttime trips to the privy. Wash basins were filled in the evening so morning ablutions wouldn't require fetching water in the pre-dawn dark. Sleep patterns adapted to the season's demands. The family might retire earlier than usual, sharing body heat under layers of blankets and quilts. They might rise later when possible, avoiding the coldest pre-dawn hours during blizzards or extreme temperature drops. Normal schedules were abandoned in favor of conservation of heat, food, fuel, and human energy. Clothing choices became increasingly strategic. Multiple thin layers trapped air better than single thick ones. Wool remained the miracle fabric, warming even when damp, breathing to prevent overheating during exertion, naturally antibacterial for extended wear without washing. Hats, scarves, and gloves were never optional but essential equipment. Food strategies shifted during these deepest winter weeks. Meals became simpler but more frequent, providing steady energy rather than large spikes and drops. Hot liquids, tea, soups, broths appeared throughout the day, warming from the inside out. Foods with high fat content provided concentrated calories and a sense of satisfaction that helped combat winter depression. The psychological aspects of deep winter survival were as important as the physical ones. Edwardian farm families understood what modern science has confirmed, that mental outlook significantly impacts physical resilience. Various strategies helped maintain spirits during these challenging months. Light became precious beyond its practical utility. Even the weak winter sun was welcomed enthusiastically when it appeared. Curtains would be opened wide to admit every possible ray. Outdoor tasks would be rescheduled to take advantage of sunny periods. The family might pause momentarily in their work to turn faces toward the light, absorbing both warmth and psychological comfort. Artificial light was used judiciously but meaningfully. Oil lamps might burn a little longer on particularly dark evenings. Extra candles might be lit for special occasions. The firelight itself was maximized, banking the fire in ways that produced more flame and illumination when family gatherings occurred. The creation of beauty within harsh circumstances provided emotional sustenance. A branch of winter berries brought inside, ice crystals on a window admired for their intricate patterns, the golden glow of firelight on faces gathered around the hearth. These small aesthetic pleasures acknowledged that humans need more than mere survival. They need moments of wonder and appreciation. Celebrations took on heightened importance. Traditional winter holidays, Christmas, New Year, Candlemas, were observed with whatever resources could be spared. These weren't the elaborate affairs of wealthy households, but simple markers that connected the family to broader community and historical rhythms. A special meal might be prepared using ingredients saved specifically for the occasion. Small gifts, often handmade during long evenings, would be exchanged. Songs or stories particular to the season would be shared. These celebrations provided psychological landmarks in the otherwise monotonous winter landscape. The social world contracted during severe weather but remained vitally important. Neighbouring farms maintained contact through occasional visits, weather permitting. News was shared, resources sometimes exchanged, mutual aid organised for those in particular need. A farmer with extra firewood might share with a widow whose supply ran low. A family blessed with a good dairy cow might bring butter to neighbours with none. These weren't just acts of charity, but pragmatic investments in community survival. Today's giver might be tomorrow's recipient. The harsh reality of Edwardian winter forged interdependence that transcended normal social boundaries. Churches remained operational regardless of weather, though attendance might drop during the worst conditions. Sunday services provided not just spiritual comfort, but essential social connection. After worship, people lingered to exchange news, arrange assistance, and simply enjoy human contact beyond their immediate household. Ministers or pastors made efforts to check on isolated parishioners during extreme weather. These visits served both spiritual and practical purposes, bringing comfort to the lonely while ensuring no one had fallen through the community safety net. The village doctor, if one existed locally, might make emergency calls regardless of conditions. Stories abound of heroic journeys through snowstorms to reach patients in need. These medical professionals, still relatively rare in rural areas, were treasured community resources whose health and safety everyone had a stake in protecting. Local knowledge became increasingly valuable as winter deepened. Which road would remain passable longest after a snow? Which spring never froze completely? Which elder in the village could predict weather changes with uncanny accuracy? This collective wisdom, accumulated over generations and shared freely, multiplied each individual's chances of survival. Children experienced deep winter differently than adults. For them, snow transformed familiar landscapes into magical playgrounds, sledding down hillsides, building snow figures, engaging in snowball battles. These activities provided exercise and joy during otherwise restricted days. Adults might join briefly, recapturing moments of lightheartedness amid serious concerns. School attendance became erratic during severe weather. Rural schools might close completely during blizzards or when temperatures dropped below certain thresholds. Education continued informally at home, reading by firelight, arithmetic lessons disguised as games, practical skills taught through daily activities. Throughout these challenging weeks, Edwardian farm families maintained hope by looking for signs of winter's eventual retreat. These weren't just pleasant observations, but critical intelligence about changing conditions that would affect planning and work. The gradual lengthening of days was noted and celebrated. A cock's stride was the traditional measure. Each day after winter solstice brought sunlight extended by roughly the length of a rooster's step. By early February, the difference became noticeable without measurement, precious additional minutes of evening light for outdoor tasks. Bird behavior provided reliable indicators. The first appearance of robins or the changing songs of resident species signaled shifts too subtle for human senses to detect directly. Experienced farmers paid attention to these avian messengers, adjusting plans and expectations accordingly. Plant life, even in apparent dormancy, responded to changing light and temperature. Snowdrops might push through frozen ground in protected spots. Willow stems took on a yellowish hue as sap began rising imperceptibly. Buds on certain trees swelled slightly, promising rather than delivering spring's renewal. The quality of light itself transformed gradually. The low, harsh winter sun gave way to something softer, warmer, with a different quality of illumination. This change is difficult to measure, but was intuitively recognized by people whose survival depended on close observation of natural cycles. Weather patterns began subtle shifts. Perhaps the snow that fell was wetter, heavier. Perhaps the ice that formed was less substantial, quicker to melt. The wind might carry occasional hints of less frigid air. These changes came inconsistently, with frequent retreats back into winter's grip, but their periodic appearance provided psychological sustenance. Farm animals sensed the coming transition. Sheep became restless as lambing season approached. Chickens might increase egg production slightly. Cattle showed more energy on milder days. These behavioral changes were noted carefully, interpreted through generations of accumulated observation. The human body itself responded to the seasonal shift. Appetite patterns changed subtly. Energy levels fluctuated with the strengthening sun. Sleep requirements might decrease marginally. The Edwardian farmer, attuned to his own physical responses as much as external conditions, recognized these internal harbingers of spring. With these first tentative signs came practical preparations for the seasonal transition. Seeds stored carefully through winter were checked for viability. Farm implements were given final repairs before the busy growing season. Breeding schedules for livestock were reviewed and adjusted. Planning turned increasingly towards spring activities. Fields would need preparation once thaws came permanently. Gardens would require attention. Lambing, calving, and other spring livestock events would demand round-the-clock monitoring. The relative quiet of deep winter would soon give way to the controlled frenzy of growth and renewal. But these preparations remained somewhat theoretical while winter maintained its grip. February often brought the heaviest snows, the most treacherous ice, the greatest challenges to stored food supplies. The promise of spring existed alongside the continuing reality of winter's dominance. This tension between hope and current hardship characterized the Edwardian rural experience of late winter. The family both anticipated better days and remained fully engaged with present challenges. This dual awareness created resilience, allowing them to endure immediate difficulties while maintaining vision of eventual relief. As February progressed into March, the balance gradually shifted. Thaws lasted longer. Frozen ground softened periodically. Birdsong increased in frequency and variety. Light extended noticeably into evening hours. These changes were celebrated quietly, without excessive optimism that might be crushed by winter's inevitable temporary returns. Inside the farmhouse, small adjustments reflected the changing season. Perhaps fire management became slightly less critical, with shorter periods of maximum heating needed. Food supplies remained carefully rationed, but with increased confidence that they would last until fresh options became available. Winter clothing was still worn, but perhaps with the occasional omission of an extra layer. Evening activities began, including more discussion of coming seasons. Garden plans were debated, field rotations considered, livestock breeding decisions finalized. These conversations had practical purposes, but also served as verbal rehearsals for the preferred future: spring's renewal and summer's abundance. The psychological burden of winter began to lift incrementally. The oppressive sense of endurance gave way to anticipation. The family's mood lightened with the lengthening days, not abandoning caution, but tempering it with measured optimism. This psychological shift was as important as any physical preparation for spring. Winter survival required a particular mental discipline, focus on immediate needs, conservation of all resources, careful management of expectations. The transition to spring mentality involved calculated risk-taking, investment of resources for future return, expanded horizons of possibility. Through all these subtle changes, the fundamental rhythms of farm life continued. Morning chores, midday meals, evening gatherings. The Edwardian farm family maintained the structures that had carried them through winter's darkest days, gradually modifying rather than abandoning proven routines. Night temperatures remained dangerously low, even as daytime warming increased. Evening fire banking continued with the same care. Bedrooms stayed frigid. Extra blankets remained necessary. The contrast between day and night conditions grew more pronounced, requiring flexibility in clothing and activity planning. The farm animals responded to changing conditions with increased energy and sometimes challenging behavior. Horses grew friskier, requiring careful handling. Cattle became more restless in their winter quarters. Sheep approaching lambing needed closer monitoring. These shifts created additional work but signaled welcome movement toward spring's renewal. As March established itself, the first true spring activities became possible during milder periods, perhaps pruning fruit trees on a sunny afternoon, maybe repairs to fences damaged by winter storms, possibly even some preliminary soil preparation in particularly well-drained areas. These tasks were approached cautiously, with awareness that winter could reassert itself at any moment. The transitional weeks brought their own unique challenges. Mud became nearly omnipresent as frozen ground thawed, creating difficult conditions for both humans and animals. Paths that had been easily navigated when frozen became treacherous quagmires. Boots required frequent cleaning. Animals needed extra attention to prevent hoof problems. Temperature fluctuations, freezing at night, thawing by day, created dangerous ice conditions each morning. Water expanded as it froze, contracted as it melted, then refroze in new configurations. These cycles made familiar terrain unpredictable, requiring heightened attention to prevent injuries from falls. Rain replaced snow as the predominant precipitation, bringing different challenges. Whereas snow could be shoveled aside, rain soaked everything and created drainage issues. Waterproof clothing, often treated canvas or wool coated with lanolin, became essential. Dripping garments hung near the fire created steamy conditions in the kitchen. The farmhouse itself responded to changing weather, expanding and contracting with temperature shifts. The structure might develop new creaks and leaks. Roofs that had shed snow effectively now needed to channel rain. Gutters required clearing of winter debris to prevent overflow and potential water damage to walls. Yet despite these challenges, the overall trajectory was positive. Each day brought incremental improvement in conditions. Each week saw tangible evidence of winter's retreating power. The balance tipped gradually but inexorably towards spring's renewal. Food options slowly expanded as the first new growth appeared. Wild greens, dandelions, nettles, sorrel could be gathered from sheltered spots. These bitter but nutritious plants were welcomed additions to the winter-limited diet. Rich in vitamins after months of preserved foods, they provided both nutrition and variety. The farm's stored eggs, carefully preserved through winter, could be replaced with increasing fresh production as daylight stimulated laying. Milk yields began rising as cattle responded to changing conditions and early growth appeared in pastures. These small improvements in food quality and quantity provided physical and psychological nourishment. Community activities increased with improving weather. Neighbours visited more frequently, planning for shared spring work, perhaps exchanging labour for ploughing or lambing, created anticipation of increased social connection. Churches might hold special services marking the seasonal transition, providing spiritual recognition of nature's renewal. Markets resumed more regular operations as travel became easier. The range of available goods expanded somewhat. News circulated more freely. These connections to the wider world reduced the isolation that characterized deep winter, reminding the farm family that they were part of broader human networks. By late March, genuine spring work became possible during favourable periods. The first seeds might be planted in sheltered garden areas. Fields could be prepared on drier days. Livestock could be released briefly into pastures for exercise and the first tentative grazing. These activities required careful timing and remained subject to weather setbacks, but their very possibility signalled winter's weakening hold. Through all these transitional experiences, the Edwardian farm family maintained the resilience developed during winter's challenges. They approached spring cautiously, conserving resources until renewal was certain, preserving the habits of care and attention that had ensured survival through the darkest days. Their experience of seasonal transition differed profoundly from our modern relationship with winter. Without instant heating, grocery stores, weather forecasting apps, or emergency services, they navigated changing conditions through direct observation, accumulated wisdom, and community support. They felt the turning of the year in their bodies, their work, their daily calculations of resource use. Looking back across more than a century, we might see their lives as unimaginably difficult, their winter endurance as almost superhuman, yet they themselves would likely have seen nothing extraordinary in their seasonal adaptations. This was simply life as they knew it, challenging certainly, but navigable through knowledge, preparation, and community. Perhaps there's something valuable for us in remembering their experience. In our climate-controlled modern lives, we've gained tremendous comfort and safety, but possibly lost something of our ancestors' intimate connection to natural cycles. Their necessary attentiveness to subtle environmental changes, their careful stewardship of limited resources, their interdependence with community and landscape, these might offer wisdom for our own uncertain future. As we lie warm in our beds, perhaps we can appreciate both the distance we've travelled from the Edwardian winter experience and the threads that still connect us to those resilient farmers, the desire for warmth and light in darkness, the satisfaction of shared meals in cold seasons, the hope that rises with lengthening days, the fundamental human capacity to endure difficulty while maintaining vision of better times. The Edwardian farm family, gradually emerging from winter's grip into spring's promise, reminds us of both human vulnerability and remarkable adaptability. Their winter survival required physical preparation, certainly, but equally important were the less tangible resources. knowledge passed through generations, community bonds that transcended individual limitations, the psychological resilience to maintain hope during the darkest days. As the cycle of seasons turned for them, winter yielding reluctantly to spring, dormancy giving way to growth, conservation transforming into creation, they participated in rhythms as old as agriculture itself. Their particular historical moment shaped the details of their experience, but the fundamental patterns connected them to ancestors and descendants alike. And now, as you feel the weight of your own blankets, the comfort of your pillow, the peaceful transition towards sleep, perhaps you carry a small appreciation for those long-ago farmers who navigated winter's challenges with such remarkable skill and endurance. And with that thought, close your eyes and drift off to sleep.